Just before we get started, I do want to say that this video is brought to you by Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community for creators with more than 27,000 classes in design, business, and more. The first 500 of you to use the link in the description below will get a 2-month free trial. Let's get into it. In the video today, we are answering a viewer question because Ali K asks us, I was just wondering, why do men have nipples? And is it true that men can lactate? As embryos, men and women start off, well, more or less as women. The genetic template of the body follows the path of the X chromosome for approximately 60 days of development, providing the embryonic man with a set of nipples. More specifically, approximately 4 to 6 weeks into development, embryos develop parallel mammary ridges. These ridges, called milk lines, span between the armpit and the chest and then descend down each side to the lower abdomen and finally narrow in towards the groin, ending high on the thigh. Ultimately, these milk lines regress, except for in the chest area, leaving us with mammary buds that develop into the familiar pair of cold weather pokies, some lactating glands called lobules, a bit of fatty tissue in between, and a few other things. For males, the Y chromosome later sets off a cacophony of genetic changes and hormonal flows, especially one quite near and dear to men aspiring to become Cutius, Altius, and Fortius. Among other things, the influx of this hormone, testosterone, stimulates the growth of the penis and the testes. However, this only answers part of the question, why do men have nipples? Another facet of this is, why have nipples stuck around in men when evolutionary processes could have weeded them out? Quite simply, it's generally thought nipples are still around in men because they just don't matter enough for evolution to rear its head. Genetic uncoupling of male and female characteristics occurs when said characteristics have substantial bearing on reproductive success. Because nibbled breasts never lost a fair maiden, and because nipples are there before testosterone kicks in, they are seemingly here to stay. However, it would be a technical faux pas to lump the male nipple in with the other vestigial structures. Indeed, the male nipple is entirely ready to perform its original function, leading to male lactation. Yes, you heard that right, men can breastfeed babies if they really want to, and it's not even that hard to make it happen. So, well, what's going on here? Milk is produced in small hollow cavities in breast tissue called alveoli. This is where the linings contain cells that secrete milk when properly triggered. While there are a variety of things that go into someone lactating, including various hormones, the main trigger for milk production is sufficient amounts of the hormone prolactin, which is primarily produced by the pituitary gland, though also by the prostate in men, and a layer of the uterine wall known as the myometrium in women, among other places. Both men and women have alveoli, but typically have marked differently levels of prolactin. In fact, a normal non-pregnant woman has around 1/3 to twice the hormone that the average man has at any given time. Late in pregnancy and after giving birth, prolactin levels can peak as high as 10 times more in these women compared to what you'll typically find in males. So the question now becomes, how can men lactate without the necessary processes involved in childbirth triggering a ramp up in prolactin production? Well, prolactin is ultimately metabolized by the liver, helping to regulate its concentration in the body in conjunction with certain mechanisms in the hypothalamus. When the liver isn't functioning properly, abnormally high levels of certain hormones may build up. This is what is thought to have happened to hundreds of male POWs during World War II who, after suffering months of starvation, began lactating during their recovery. Experts opined that the stress and deprivation interfered with the liver and certain hormone-producing glands' normal activities. Once properly fed, the liver took longer to recover than the hormone-producing glands, pertinent to the topic at hand, resulting in a buildup of concentration of prolactin in the POWs' bodies, causing them to start lactating. More recently, a report in the Canadian Medical Association Journal documented a case of a man who had a pituitary tumor that resulted in, among other things, overproduction of prolactin, causing him to lactate. In fact, there are numerous reports throughout history of men lactating, including in the Talmud, where a poor man whose wife died while their baby was quite young had a miracle. His breasts opened and he nursed his child. In Numbers chapter 11 verse 12 in the Bible, it notes, "Have I conceived all this people? Have I begotten them, that thou shouldest say unto me, carry them in thy bosom, as a nursing father beareth the sucking child, unto the land which thou swearest unto their fathers." Then, in Anomalies and Curiosities of Medicine from 1896, Gold and Pyle report that both a South American native and a male Brazilian missionary nursed children after their wives lost the ability to do so. And a similar, much more modern and well-documented report was made in 2002 of a Sri Lankan man, Mr. B. Wijaratne, who took up breastfeeding his 18-month-old daughter after his wife died, giving birth to their second child. He initially had attempted to feed the older child formula upon her mother's death, but this was summarily rejected by the toddler. He later stated, "Unable to see her cry, I offered my breast. That's when I discovered that I could breastfeed her." If you're wondering how this is possible, it's known that expectant fathers and those with newborns also see a spike in prolactin compared to their normal levels. While not anywhere close enough to cause lactation in men normally, you may be aware that nipple sucking can result in women who didn't have a baby ultimately lactating anyway. What's less well known is that the receptors responsible for triggering the brain to in turn stimulate the pituitary gland to produce more prolactin and trigger the release of oxytocin, which is necessary to get the milk flowing, exist and function in both men and in women. This process can be commonly observed in cases of women adopting babies and wanting to breastfeed them. They are able to achieve this via regularly having the child suckle and further using a breast pump every few hours over the course of several weeks. According to the Goldfarb Breastfeeding Clinic, in a small study they conducted looking at 228 women attempting this, 31% were able to produce enough milk to provide the full caloric and nutritional needs of the baby. While that may seem like a small percentage, it should be noted that nearly all 228 women were at least able to provide some milk to their adopted babies. This same thing can also be observed in various animals, including sometimes used to cause goats who have never had kids to produce milk. For men, as with women, the net result of having a baby around and regularly using a breast pump or letting the baby suckle results in a prolactin spike. For some men, this may be high enough to trigger milk production, allowing the male to breastfeed a baby. Whether that's what happened in the case of the Sri Lankan man or if he had some other condition is not clear, with his physician, Dr. Kamal Yasinki, simply noting to the media, "Men with hyperactive prolactin hormone can produce breast milk." There are also some drugs that occasionally have the side effect of increased prolactin concentration in the body, which causes male lactation, such as the antipsychotic chlorpromazine, marketed under the name Thorazine and Largactil, and the heart medication digoxin, marketed under the name Lanoxing, among other names. It should also be noted here that some teenage and adult men produce milk without babies or drugs. Called galactorrhea, it often develops during the hormone surge of puberty, but can also be caused by hypothyroidism, among other conditions. Videos documenting such lactation, such as bodybuilder chest milk, well, they abound on the web. In addition, approximately 5% of newborn babies of both sexes secrete milk from their breasts. Colloquially called witch's milk, it is believed to be caused by the combined effects of prolactin and growth hormones from the mother's milk, along with thyroid and pituitary hormones from the baby. The milk produced is similar in composition to a typical woman's milk. The condition usually subsides within a couple of months. Finally, as I'm sure there are some men out there interested, despite the social stigma, and potentially some women who'd kill for the men to be able to help out on the breastfeeding front, outside of the aforementioned nipple suckling technique boosting natural prolactin levels, a much more effective solution for men would simply be to buy some prolactin and induce it into their body directly. However, while this is sometimes done to induce lactation in animals, and we were able to locate some sources of human prolactin for sale online, at least as far as we can find, it doesn't appear to be a treatment that any doctor would administer and oversee for human males who want to breastfeed their children. It's also true that there could be potential side effects of high prolactin in males, but this has not been well studied. However, it is known that abnormally high prolactin levels can cause loss of libido in men and women, and in men potential problems with impotence while said levels remain high. Further, prolactin is involved in at least 300 known processes in the body, including playing a role in one's metabolism and immune system, and in men potentially lowering testosterone levels. It should also be noted that the general consensus is that, due to certain physiological processes during puberty, even with sufficient prolactin, it is unlikely a breastfeeding father would produce nearly as much milk as a woman with equivalent levels. That said, while that seems to be the general consensus of the medical community, we couldn't find a single study looking at volume of milk production in lactating males that have been studied, so it's possible this is just a widely accepted hypothesis at this stage. And if you're wondering about the nutritional value of human male breast milk compared to female breast milk, in a 1981 study of a lactating human male, it was determined that, much like the milk found in both male and female lactating babies, to quote the study, the concentrations of lactose, proteins, and electrolytes in the breast secretion of this man are within the range of colostrum and milk obtained from normal lactating women. So, look, I did have a look on Skillshare to see whether they had anything about male lactation. Alas, no. Skillshare let me down. But I'll forgive them because they deliver on, the other stuff. The stuff that you're probably 99.9% more likely to do. And I want to tell you a little bit about Skillshare before we get into today's bonus fact. Skillshare is an online learning community for creators. They've got 27,000 courses in different areas like design and business and, well, a whole lot more. If you get Skillshare's premium membership, you get to join all of those classes. Not that you could ever really complete them all. There are 27,000, I think I mentioned that, but you can watch any one of them you want. There's no paying per class. It's perfect if there's some particular area you want to improve your skills in, or maybe you need to learn something for work or to improve your career, or maybe you're just curious about something. You can do it all with Skillshare. Listen, I've talked a lot, we've done a lot of Skillshare ads, and I've taken a lot of classes, and I've talked about the video stuff, the YouTube stuff. I even talked about a course that was about going viral, and I kind of scoffed at that at the beginning because I was like, you don't really engineer this virality thing. It just sort of happens or not. But the course was actually amazing, taught by someone who goes viral a lot more than me. So there was that. Yeah, that was like bittersweet. Anyway, it was great. I learned a lot. So Skillshare, it's also super affordable. All of those courses is just $10 a month with an annual subscription, so that's also cool. The first 500 of my subscribers, though, to use the link in the description below, you're gonna get 2 months of a free trial. So that's great. Do that, and let's get into those bonus facts. Have you ever wondered why some people end up with more than 2 nipples? Well, want to know more? In short, this is just a result of an incomplete regression of the milk line that results in 1 or more extra mammary buds developing outside of where we'd normally expect to find them, but they're still usually along that milk line. The end result is an extra nipple and sometimes the associated breast tissue. These are indeed surprisingly common, appearing in as many as 1 in 20 people, though most who have them don't usually recognize the little protuberance as an extra nipple. Numbering among the super mammary are reported to be Mark Wahlberg, Lily Allen, Harry Styles, and Tila Swindon. And now I want to go take my shirt off and see if I've got some weird protuberance that could be a nipple. That's weird. I always thought they were obvious like they're regular nipples. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, give us a thumbs up. Also support the show by checking out Skillshare. That'd be cool of you. Subscribe. Some other videos from the archives linked to on the screen. And as always, thank you for watching.